everybody, I hope that you guys are doing good. I hope your life is treating you well and swell and all them things there. Today, we are going to get stuck into a case that I have wanted to cover in such a long time. Like, I literally have wanted to tell this story since before I started doing this series. It's the one that comes to mind when people ask why I enjoy making this content, or accurately, why I'm so obsessed with true crime. Today's case spans years, decades, and it's got all of the elements of a case that will just make you stick around. It started as a mysterious disappearance, and it unwrapped as a heartbreaking tale of anger, of loss and betrayal. Now, while what happens really does fit the plot for like a Hollywood movie, everything that I'm going to tell you is true and did happen in real life. So let's get into this week's episode of the anniversary with me, Yinka Bokinni. Shwa-na-na-na, 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 shwa-na-na-na. No long tin today, let's tell our story. We are starting on September the 2nd, 1999. A man named Ronald Cohen was cleaning out the basement of a house that he had just sold in New York, a neighborhood called Jericho. He was cleaning it before the new owners moved in, and the previous owner, before Ronald had bought the house years earlier, had left a big steel drum, a big barrel, 55-gallon, in the crawl space in the basement. Now, it was there when he moved in, and Ronald had never really paid any attention to it, but now he had to move it. The new owner wanted nothing to do with it. So he managed to roll it out, and he left it on the curb with the rest of his rubbish for the bin men to come and to collect it. But they didn't do that. They left a note on the barrel saying that it was too heavy for them to remove. So they took all of the other debris and house moving junk, left the barrel there, and in the note as well, it said that they couldn't get it open, so it might contain chemicals, they're not allowed to remove that, therefore they just left it. So the 55-gallon drum stood on the pavement, and Ronald was just a little bit pissed. He decided to open it and to remove the content so that it wouldn't be too heavy for the bin men to come and get it next time. He got a screwdriver and he started to pry open the lid, and the smell caught him straight away. His curiosity had got the better of him, and he carried on. He peeled the lid back, trying to see what was inside, and he was absolutely horrified when he saw what appeared to be a hand inside the drum and a lady's shoe. Ronald didn't dull. He called the police immediately. They took the drum to Nassau County Coroner's office, and it was revealed that inside it was an intact, mummified body of a woman. She was relatively young. They could tell that her cause of death was blunt force trauma, and she was dressed in 1960s style clothing. They also found that she had dental work done, which the investigators believed would have been done in Latin America. So the pathologist had the body, and they were shocked to discover, after x-raying it, that the woman had been almost 9 months pregnant when she had died. The baby was still in her body. Also in the drum, other items were plastic pellets, these green ones. There was a pocketbook, so like a handbag, a makeup kit and a dress book, a wallet, and plastic flower stems with leaves as well. There were 2 rings and a locket, and there was a green liquid at the bottom of the barrel. There were detectives assigned to the case, and the hunt was on to find the identity of the woman in the drum. The forensic team got to work on the address book that they found in there, and they had to actually put them into a special machine to dehydrate the pages because, as you can imagine, it was ineligible. Slowly though, names and addresses and phone numbers began revealing themselves from this drum. They had to work out how long the woman had been in it as well. But the thing is, if the body had been in the drum since the 60s, this is 1999, that's 30, 40 years previous, it wasn't the best thing to go on. Don't you reckon? Like, the people could have passed away, they could have moved on, and the numbers and the addresses initially didn't yield any results. Investigators though, they ploughed on, and they looked at the previous owners of the house, dating back to the decade that the body had been linked to. And they also began investigating the drum itself. They found that it had been made in 1965. and that it had been used for transporting dye. A chemical company confirmed that the green liquid was a halogen dye used in the manufacturing of plastic plants, and we know that some plastic plants were found in the drum. They added that the dye had stopped being used in 1971, so investigators knew that the woman was placed in the drum between 1965 and 1971. The police were starting to get a timeline together. They also discovered that the pellets that they found in the drum were used to make plastic flowers, and the markings on the actual barrel itself showed that it had been at a place called Melrose Plastics, which was a company that was no longer in operation in 1999, but it had been co-owned by a man called Howard B. Elkins, and dun dun dun, he also lived in the house where the drum was found up until 1971. They interviewed neighbours who had lived there, but nothing really came out of that. An anonymous tip did come in though, and it told the police that Howard Elkins had been close to a Hispanic woman in the early 60s. So now they're just convinced that they have their man. They're like, boom, bam, bomb, we've got this guy. So they rolled up on him. They traced him to Florida where he had moved, and he confirmed that he had had an affair in the 60s, but he couldn't remember her name, he couldn't remember what she looked like, that it wasn't important, it was just a fling. And I'm not saying that said that he gets girls, yeah, but I've never had an affair. If I did have one, I think I remember it, but he claimed ignorance. Apart from that though, he wasn't very cooperative. He refused to give the police a DNA sample. What they wanted to do is rule him out, or in, I guess, of being the unborn child's father, but he said no. The police told him they would go and get a court order and they would come back to him, and they went along their way. But after the police left, 70-year-old Howard Elkins bought a gun and shot himself in his neighbour's garage, killing himself. The police did the DNA test anyway after he died, and it was found that it was more than 99% likely that he was the father of the baby in the drum. So now the police are like, yeah, definitely, we've got our man, but they still don't know who the woman is. Then there was a breakthrough with the address book. So while all of this was happening, the police were going to Florida, Howard had killed himself, they didn't stop going through the numbers, visiting the houses that were found in this address book, and remarkably, a woman called Kathy Andrade lived in the same place that she had in the 60s, and she told the police about her missing friend, someone that she always wondered what had happened to them. And that's when the police finally got a name. The body in the drum, the pregnant woman dressed in the 1960s clothing, was Reyna Marroquín, and she had been missing for 30 years, since 1969. Now, Reyna was originally from El Salvador. She grew up in a time of political and economic instability, and many people in her home country left to find better opportunities in the USA, but Reyna was pretty chilled. She had a close family, she was married, but in 1966, she did decide to pack up and leave for the USA after finding out that her husband had a pregnant mistress. She landed in New York City. At first, she got a job as a nanny, and then she moved into a home for single women. She attended English classes, and that's where she made a new friend, her teacher, Kathy. She found a new job at Melrose Plastics factory, and she got a boyfriend, but he was married and he had a family. But according to her friend Kathy, Reyna seemed happy. She told Kathy a lot about him, but she never ever told her his name. She wouldn't let her meet him, but she would tell Kathy that he would take her out, he would treat her nicely, he would take her for long walks, and she was convinced that he was going to leave his wife. But when Reyna became pregnant, that never happened. Instead, he set her up in a small apartment on her own, and he just kept her there. He had lied, he never left his wife. Kathy and Reyna continued with their friendship, and she told Kathy almost everything, except of course the identity of the mystery man. But she did tell Kathy that in desperation, she called her lover's house and confessed to his wife on the phone, telling her that she was pregnant with her husband's baby. He called Reyna and he threatened to kill her, and that's when she told Kathy that she was scared, this is what she had done, that she was convinced that he was going to hurt her, and Kathy was really concerned. She went to Reyna's house to check on her, but when she got there, Reyna wasn't there, and she never came home. Kathy called the police, and and they didn't seem interested. They said she'd probably gone home, meaning El Salvador. Because she was a Hispanic woman in the 60s and she was missing, she wasn't high on their list of priorities. Now, weeks passed and no one heard from her, and even her mum, living back in El Salvador, stopped receiving the weekly letters that Reyna sent ever since she left home. And soon, years passed. The 70s came and went, the 80s came and went, and the 90s. And life went on, and Reyna seemed to have been forgotten until that day, this week, in September of 1999. Police believe that on the night that Reyna died, Howard had arranged to meet her in that factory, the one that she worked at and the one that he co-owned, and he killed her in a fit of rage. That he took her body to his house and put it in the drum, and he weighed it down with those plastic pellets. They believe that he actually planned to take the drum and to drop it into the sea, but at 160 kilograms, he couldn't move it. They think that he rolled it into the crawl space in his house and he left it where it stayed for 30 years. And if it wasn't for Robert Cohen, the man who had sold his house and wanted to get rid of the steel drum, we never would have found out what happened to Reyna Marroquín. After it was discovered who she was and what had happened to her, a reporter went back to her family home in El Salvador, and her mum said that she always knew something had happened to her daughter when she stopped receiving those letters all those decades ago, that she had had nightmares about her daughter being in a barrel. Now, Reyna's body was buried back home in El Salvador, and her mum died a week after her funeral. I've attached all of my research in the links in the description box for you to take advantage of, and trust me, everything that I read, that I watched and I listened to, if you get a second or an hour, make sure you listen to the Crime Junkie episode that I've linked on this case, because I feel like I covered it well and I feel like I've told you the story, but like it is up there with the most bizarre and heartbreaking and interesting cases that you're probably ever gonna come across. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back next week with another episode. Make sure you follow my true crime Instagram. The link is in the description. If you like what I do, follow or subscribe rather, comment, like, all that sort of stuff. And thank you for rocking with me for our little true crime thing that we do. It's really appreciated. And yeah, I'll see you next week. That was a story of Reyna Marroquín, aka the body in the barrel.